going to put this in a holding account. So you're earning it, but you can retain your supportive service. And the thought is, once you make it to a certain wage, that will hopefully help you be sustainable for your family, then that holding account will be made available to you as a nest egg. So I thought that was a creative way for an employer to try and address the benefits for it.
Well, what I like about that is I've heard that from CEOs because some of them aren't just unaware of the benefits cliff. And so I've had a CEO say, I was trying to promote this person, and I kept trying to promote this person. This person's like, no. And he's like, why would you turn down a promotion? Because she was worried about losing housing assistance, childcare assistance, and start thinking about ways in which to help an employee kind of mitigate that fear and allow her to get promoted to a higher paying job. They're so worried about their benefits, and I won't take this job because I don't know what that looks like, and I know I'm going to lose something, by the way. And the fear of losing something is bigger than the promotion I'm going to get. The pay a decent wage.
I started my career as a counselor in opportunities for hires with disabilities. I've sat with people that we've done benefits analysis before, and trying to convince them they are so scared to lose those benefits. And a lot of times, like especially when they get SSDI, the wage they have to make is pretty high compared to just working part-time or under the SGA amount. But and they're so afraid to lose the Medicaid and the Medicare or anything like that. It's difficult to convince them that, especially if they've lived like that for years. And trying to get them to see, like, it might be a little bit of a stretch, but like, 5, 10, 20 years, you're going to be better off because you're going to have more earning power. But they don't see that. And the other thing they see, they get this lump sum of money and they're used to paying their bills like that, and they're so scared to have that reduced. Because that happens in some instances, certain benefits, or it just goes away. And it's scary to people. I mean, like I've had people that I'm not going to do this because of that. They're just going to stay on benefits. They're going to work part-time and sad because that's not.
They'll turn down a full-time job instead of part-time for that reason.
So we actually the job center going to be partnering with CMHA, who just got special money, and this is a town, right? But special money, $1 million to the big city office to mitigate the benefits cliff for their residents as they go into employment. And that'll be a great thing, but it's also a limited thing, right? And there's a couple of other initiatives like that. But it's something I think about it. That might be another area we need to advocate for, like being able to carry your benefits and not have to hold the money in a band, or changes in policy right around that. But that's definitely something that's got to be, when we're talking about those kinds of employers, that's something we've got to think about.
Well, the Federal Reserve in Atlanta does a wonderful presentation on this. We brought him into our board retreat last November, and probably needs to go to a larger audience because the numbers are daunting. Take a slight increase in your pay and you are going to fall so far back, you will not recover. Kind of the presentation that they do. Versus how the employer, the business sector demand of the federal government that you take the cliffs off and use a sliding scale model that allows this to continue. It's really going to be business. It's going to say, you got to do this or we're not going to work for us. Versus people that are never going to make that decision. And they said, and the guy said they shouldn't. I mean, he just let the bad economic decisions for them to do it. But they do a wonderful presentation on this. We brought him in. It's a guy actually from Cleveland is now at the Fed in Atlanta. David, I forget his last name, but he did a wonderful. It's a good thing to do in general. Probably should have done it to a larger scale than my own board. But it's just valuable learning about why people are making these choices. And they think they're making bad choices. I said, no, they're faced with two bad choices. They're making a less bad choice.
They're making the economically rational.
That's SSDI clip. And I mean, if you see that I've seen it on paper, it's like, I can't even advise the person to do this right now because it doesn't make any sense for them. Because they're going to make less money working full time. It seems insane. That would happen.
We keep coming back to this idea of like types of employers, right? And so I'm wondering if so here we have like, and I'm wondering if this strategy is misplaced because this is our job seeker strategy and we have the fourth bullet is driving employer best practices around wages, benefits, and hiring practices. I wonder, does that belong in the employer goal?
Mhm.
And then do we need to be more specific about which employers?
I'm walking back into this in the middle of the day, I'm about to take a phone call, but Lisa, I know that you're with the workforce advisory. The US conference in there.
Oh, the US conference, yeah, yeah.
I know that that's something they're gonna be really focused on. At the last leadership meeting, this topic was a huge topic of discussion for prioritizing moving forward. So there may be some ability to talk about this on one.
Oh, good, because I chair the policy committee now. So, yay.
So we move that strategy to the employer goal, but how do we get at this concept of like, I don't want to say the right employers or employers of choice, but like, how do we get at that concept, right, of employers that either are or are willing to take on the best practices that you're all talking about, right? That, supporting employees, if they're going to go over the cliff or, provide those other supports. How do we, what are the words that we use for those kinds of employers?
Do we have to? We have to distinguish employers for that particular strategy?
That's just what I'm hearing, but maybe we don't need to have it in writing, but.
I don't, and I'll advocate for one side of it. I don't know that we do.
Okay.
As soon as we start to say good employers, that automatically implies that there are bad employers.
Right.
Right? And I'm just not sure that.
You want to make enemies like that?
Right.
To me, it's more about if we are aware of or identify employers, regardless of sector,
Mhm,
we want to make sure we educate them and support them in understanding these best practices.
mhm.
And that's not necessarily to single them out and say they're not doing it, but it's
Gotcha,
almost like it's a condition of our system.
right. Because if you like vilify them, then they're less likely, right,
Yeah.
to hear your best practices and, yeah.
Aren't we saying that in bullet 2? Or could that be expanded?
Saying what?
That they'll have those best practices in place to support employees.
So bullet 2 is more about the work of the board. So like how the organization is supporting job seekers.
Right, make certain that we don't set them up to benefit cliffs.
Oh, okay,
Or mitigate that as much as possible.
That's
because
fair.
There were employers who are implementing best practices.
yeah. I think there was, so that's a good point, Lisa. I think this strategy was intended to be a best practice. A best practice of workforce providers, which is supporting job seekers with all of their needs until they find that employment. Yeah, it's less about employers, I guess, but that's a good. And so, yeah, I think we're talking about bullet 4, which is the employer best practices. And so we would slot it in with goal 3, where it would fit nicely with, the culture, connection to social services, retention.
That's right.
And then not calling out specific types of employers to kind of keep your arms open to work with all employers.
Maybe not all.
Not a significant.
Not the like truly evil ones.
Good employer nationwide.
All right, so excuse me, we're moving with moving bullet 4 out, strategy 4 out. Anything else missing or funky about the strategies here? And sorry, that bottom one is cut off. It says using workforce data to help inform training and certification programs.
The way it's pointing out,
I'm sorry,
right? I was just pointing out that's it. Okay.
do it, yeah.
Okay.
You're talking about young people? So the strategies around young people are to create awareness among secondary school students, and I have heard some other opinions about secondary school, so we can talk about that. About a variety of career options, including vocational trades and opportunities in local industries. So that's that data piece again, right? Like you all know what's coming down the pike. Help publicize training, certification requirements, and apprenticeships that develop transferable skills in the local economy. And then promoting connections between employers and secondary schools, vocational schools, and community colleges. Just want to point out, I heard this so loudly and so clearly from all the employers that I spoke with. They all want to be in the schools. They all want to be reaching those, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds and telling, showing off their facilities and telling them about their benefits and all those kinds of things. So like kind of predispose those kids to come straight for them once they're out. So
Yeah, I think that's a big deal because, I'd love to say that we do that really well. We don't. And I think that, as we think about how it feels insurmountable when you are working on fewer people and to give them a side gig of figure out how to do this with Columbus Public Schools. We've spent a lot of time with Columbus Public Schools, but it starts and it stops and it starts and it stops because our business needs change. And we need to have dedicated people within our organizations. That's a whole different story. But until we do, making that something that could easily be picked up and transferable amongst several different employers. If it's a model or if it's an organization that can be an intermediary to help figure out logistics and work between, I think could be a huge advantage in that space.
and when the steering committee talked about potential measures, one of them was, that there's this just like, flow of kids coming out of school, knowing or having, ideas about kind of what industries they want to work in and what training they need and not all going into 4-year schools necessarily, but going to the trades, going into 2 years, going into, certifications, because that's that sort of mid-level that a lot of employers are looking for. And sometimes you get a 4-year degree and you're either overqualified or you have the wrong qualifications.
I will just say though, in that strategy down there, everybody's in it and nobody's been particularly successful. Yeah,
That's why I'm thinking if there were a model of, if we could help create a model that was successful, that could be repeatable across businesses, that might create momentum in that space. Each individual, I imagine it's exhausting for each individual business trying to work with all of you, because I can imagine from a Columbus public school perspective or any public school, they don't have a large group of people that do that either.
right.
So that's why it tends to stop and start depending upon times that those resources available on either side of this, either side of that.
Yeah, Nicole, I think part of the issue is that there's no coordination, right? So it's siloed in our community. It's siloed with the corporates, by the way. It's the same challenge we have with summer youth employment, where we go and we talk to the CEOs like, hey, we gotta get our youth in jobs this summer. Can you help us out? And, 1 or 2 will raise their hand because they may have someone internally that's their job. But not a lot of these organizations or corporations have that as their job. And so it's so disconnected and not siloed. If we had a community where someone was responsible for driving this. I don't know if it's us. When we had an organization that was responsible for driving this across our corporate community and with our providers, I think that would be, that's an asset we don't have in this community that we probably need. Because you hear it from employers like, yeah, we want to do it, we want to get people more, we want to get kids involved in touring our places, the whole 9 yards, we want to give them on-the-job training kind of things, and summer jobs. But I don't want to do it, by the way. I don't want to have to do it myself. I need someone to do that for us. And so, and no one's looking around saying, hey, I'll do it. And that's the problem. And so we have this silo approach of something we all recognize that we need. And we have problems getting some of you dollars out the door. And these corporations are frustrated because they can't get kids to come through their operation. So it may be an organization that doesn't exist today, or someone has to raise their hand and take the mantle. But with us missing that, it's always going to be fractured. It's always not going to be coordinated. And we're all going to be frustrated by the same stuff year after year after year.
And I guess to build off of that, I don't know the answer either, whether or not that's this organization's responsibility, but maybe it ought to be our responsibility to help solve the problem. And so,
Dean.
yeah. So, I mean, promote connections is okay, but I would actually want that to be stronger, or maybe use more than just promote. I'd say promote, create, and coordinate connections. I mean, demonstrate, actionable steps beyond just sort of promoting.
To the extent we're directly involved in this, it seems like we ought to have some strategic focus. I mean, we were talking about construction jobs, for example, and the stigma around that and blocking people from considering that as a career. To be able to go in kind of with one specific set of priorities or goals, rather than just kind of being a big guidance counselor or something. But to keep the priority jobs in the community front of mind and try to promote entry into those, it seems like the strategic carryover for us. I don't know if that's us directly or some combination of people, but I think, it's a little amorphous in this context. It needs to happen in the broader sense. But I think our role should be more strategic, even in terms of where we're putting that focus.
Lisa, where does Educational Service Center fall in this? This is what I do all day.
Laughing to myself because two employees have left this organization to do this exact job in different places. Right.
Yep.
And that, when John Hambrick left to go work with Christine at the Educational Service Center, this is their job. It has been, I think, the challenge they have is not bringing the right employers to the table. Can help me out? You all just stole Opal from us. And she's supposed to be doing this with Columbus City Schools. You've got the superintendent of Westerville retiring, going to Columbus State. And I looked at what his job description was in the paper and I started laughing because it's the exact same job description you all have for Opal. So I think part of the issue, and it's going to be controversial too, because I love Opal, I love John, I think I want him to succeed, but the board is in the right place to do this work. Why? Because we are the neutral party in the middle. Right?
So from a director standpoint, aspirationally, you would want us to do this work.
I think we can convene and coordinate in the same way that we're doing with LAC. I think we can do that. And we are funding together with the county. We are funding a particular youth program. It's not necessarily, it plays into this, but it is not all of this.
Right.
I do think.
And it's not in all the schools, right?
Right, and it's not in all the schools. And I think that, we're all sitting here, we all know that Columbus is growing, but it's not gonna grow enough anyway, still to fill the jobs we've got. And who should we be focusing on, but the kids right in front of our face? And trying to retain them in the region, plug them in, even if they go somewhere else for school. To come back because they're attached to an employer or a sector that has, helped them to form that attachment while they're still here. Because we talk about this problem, but we've got this emerging workforce and we're ignoring them, and who better to at least convene and set the strategy than the board?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I think that's consistent with maybe what I was suggesting, which is we need to help solve the problem.
Make
And if
it,
it's by convening or setting strategies.
strengthen that language, yeah, promote,
Like,
create.
that could be with the Columbus Compact, so that it covers across. You know, a lot of school systems.
Yeah.
Because I forget, I think it was in the Netherlands. Dr. Harrison, somebody was talking about Holland school system, which is, you know, relatively affluent suburb, didn't know where 40% of their kids, what happened to them.
Right.
5 years later.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a case where schools, like, their job is to get you graduated, and it's like somebody else's job to get scholarships, maybe. You know, but beyond that, it's the end of the school system's role.
Right.
So how do you build this continuity connected? We don't even know where they went, and this is a
Right.
relatively affluent suburb.
Yeah.
And I
You know,
heard
we're
that a
starting
lot.
Pretty big hole.
I heard that a lot, is that once the students graduate, like, they're hard to find, you know,
There's
There's-
no system to connect them,
yeah,
which is interesting, right? So it should be. There should be, and they worked on it, where the high school system would talk to the post-secondary. But what else is really interesting is even the high fluent districts, they watch the kids go to college. But they come back, they're not making it. So then you have that disconnect too, because that's a huge field that you can kind of tap into. I mean, everybody has this dream of going to college. Well, the majority of them come back that first year. So what could we do to capture that particular subgroup and get them into some of the jobs? I think that conversation is changing a bit, where especially in suburban areas, there are parents that are looking at some of the pilots that are going, wait a minute. So if you go here and you get an STNA, then you go to Columbus State, you get your RN, but you're working in Ohio State and they're gonna pay you to get the BSN to the MSN. They're listening to that more, and we have more parents now talking about those. I don't have to pay for college, so I think it's the whole switch. And I know when we all started, Jim and the mayor's office, we started going down lower because the kids don't know what they don't know. If their parents aren't working, they don't know what a job even looks like. So having people that come in uniforms and see it and taking them into those places at the 7th grade level, it's huge. It's giving them the experiences. So, I mean, it's so big that I think that early entry is where we've got to go, but then have some kind of safety net for the ones that think they know where they're going, to get them back to get into an apprenticeship where they have real wages right away, right? And it graduated.
Sean, you mentioned that, you know, when these kind of conversations come up, there may be 1 or 2 CEOs that raise their hand because they have a person that they can have prioritize this. I think that this is a really great idea. It makes sense for the board, but it's also going to be a heavy lift. Because we're not just talking about Columbus City schools, we're talking about all the kids in the county and the other school districts. And they've got constraints too around what they have staff capacity and ability to do. So I don't know if this is an area where we can engage the private sector on working with us to build something out, potentially help with funding it to develop something that can be taken both from the employer side, from employer to employer, but to the individual schools as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. I think our direct hire of Opal was in direction we were receiving from the corporate community saying, we got to do this. And we think, since you guys are talking to us all the time, you need to have someone on staff that's connecting the dots. And working with partners like the board and others, but you guys got to have someone on staff that's connecting the dots. And so, I think the more we have these conversations, the more we're bringing the employers to the table for these conversations, Stephen. There's an opportunity for us to have that conversation that you just laid out. But our hire of Opal was just was in that regard, really. we have to start connecting these dots. And so, we had to begin somewhere as an organization, because that's not a place that we were actually in, by the way. But we were hearing it all the time. And so we were funded by a corporate, from a corporate to hire for that position. Also, so,
So the circumstance that exists in our community, just like a dam that's cracked, and you poked the hole in one of the dam cracks, and so did David from the state. So what, we have to have a role here, and it's natural ability for us to be a leader here. So even if we're not currently recognized as a leader, as we start to convene and have the discussion and move the needle, then we will automatically fill that role of leadership, because that's where it belongs.
yeah.
Right, and it could be said across every industry that is, trying to get young people. Right, so it's agnostic to what skill set, so to me, I think that this is a no-brainer for us. And what we decide to step and do today without the fear of being wrong, because I could care less about being wrong. Because once we start to move, we're going to figure out what our real position is. So to me, it's like, let's lean in, let's move forward, not let fear, stop us from doing something, but we're smart enough to figure out what the right thing is. That's my thought.
So, Lisa, how do the industry sector partnerships fill that gap, right? So we have the one for healthcare. We got our grant. We're gonna spend, one of the main goals of using the grant is to educate on healthcare careers.
Right,
The entry points, the career ladders, et cetera.
right.
We have other ISPs. Is that the place to connect that bit of work and then promote the programs that are available in the ISPs? Because the ISPs are gonna allow us to have more depth to the conversation about careers. And those are very committed employers that are not in the ISP.
That's good. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, there are some places where we are funded and where this is a strategy, our free apprenticeship, the ISPs. We have an ask in the legislature right now for funding. Now, whether Franklin County would get the money in the end, that's still going to be worked out. But overall, I will say we have strategies, we have the ability to convene. In some places we're funded. Overall, we're not funded to do this kind of work. Because even though we've got all that youth money, the very specific population of youth that we're working with. But we can also, make sure we're using that money to do these things as well. But I mean, you do need to know that we would probably need to bring in additional funds. Working on that at the state level, absolutely. But whether at the state level, then it would trickle down to us is another thing.
At a tactical level, would it be worth our starting point, to pull together some kind of summit of educators and school people and the like, explore get a real good sense of what's going on out there, look at other best practices in other communities, and try to build our leadership role around a strategy development about how to do this kind of stuff better. I mean, that could get us a pool of data, could get us, real world sense of what's going on.
So some would say that's what the compact is doing, right? There was Success Found, which is a state level driven meeting of employers and educators. We're just lucky we've got some workforce board in there. I think, what we're trying to do with the youth committee is we were trying to understand the other thought leaders, the more strategic groups, like I Know I Can and the Education Service Center. We pulled them together to start some conversations, thinking about using a model like WAC, the Workforce Advisory Council. So pulling on what's being done out there and looking how can we be the convener and lead. So
I mean, if the ground's covered, it's covered, but it's just, it apparently isn't getting to the street level.
right, no, you're right. So, and I think if this was a strategy, we'd start to focus that more.
Major scorecard change for school district.
Yeah,
25. I heard Peggy chuckle, so she knows more about it than I do. But there's a scorecard change in what counts as them doing their job well. And in that scorecard change that was explained to me by Hilliard this week, you get a student who went all the way through college prep, 4.0 student, goes to college, they still will not get positive credit because they haven't met other certain criteria on career readiness or awareness. You probably you know more about this than I do, but the educators are worried. Like they know they're gonna get a D currently, even if they're doing great. So they're
So
changing
this
their
could be a
practice.
real opportunity.
And this is sort of where it maybe fits. Boy, it's a resource intensive space. I get asked every day, I've been working on it for a year straight. When are we gonna hire them? When are they all gonna start showing at the door? Well, I've talked to them in that grade. Gonna be a bit. I wouldn't wait for them right now. And it's so much need right now, and everyone's really focused, less resources, more work. Maintaining the attention of the employers and realizing you can't employ them tomorrow. You're not gonna go to the middle school today and have employees tomorrow. That sustainability is very resource intensive. Even in our environment as a single employer, that is really a challenge in the face of, in our case, 3,000 job openings, but we're trying to document careers. It is a very difficult proposition to manage. I don't disagree with you, convener have a role. It is intense.
You hit the nail on the head, right? And I think this is what, when you started talking to me, when I thought about the Cristo Rey organization that we have, in the community that's probably doing this well, right? You know, I think there are probably 8 or 9 of us that have been engaged with them for the last 10 years. You're on board, so I know you know this. It is really intensive work from the employer's perspective to take 9th graders and 10th graders into the work environment and to manage and babysit. This is great work. This is special stuff, but it's a big bite. If we go down this path, you know, and now may be the right time to do it, but it's a big ask.
And I'll say there are some models that come up in the last year or so. If you look at what Ola Danji has done recently with Bridge Ed, having been one of the 5 employers they picked, it is the best I have seen. There is a model, it can be copied, it is being funded by Education Service Center. It was run this year and extended. My understanding is they're gonna try and hire someone to sustain it. But there is a model. It was a
There are
pilot, they
models
worked.
in other major cities, where it's an organization. DC had a great model pre-pandemic. But it is a staff of people who are working with employers to make sure they can house kids. They're starting with 5th graders and camps that have all kinds of career focuses, you know, and they move, and I've been saying this for a long time, but it has to be funded. And it's not real dollars that fund it. It has to be philanthropic and employers who fund it. Certainly government can play a role, but they can't be the only one. And it's really like taking kids in the summer and doing fun things, age appropriate stuff. So by the time they're 18, they may be spending one day with career preparation and the rest of the week they're interning for 20 hours. We could do that. We just got to get, maybe that's where the board leads. One of the things the board leads, to try to get that established.
You're closer to that than any of us would.
It's the personnel that it takes to, right? Currently, we do a 2-week model that they're trying, where a student can actually go and work 40 hours for 2 weeks, then they go to school for 2 weeks. And you have kids out, but then it's also being the good steward to the student and to the employer. I mean, it's labor intensive on the employer and the school, right? And trying to do that. And then you have the whole legalities of it. If it's, are they allowed? I mean, the best example I can give is if somebody goes and applies at Kroger's, and I only use this because we all know Kroger's are big there, Giant Eagle, and you get your meat sliced. A kid can't use a slicer until they're 18. So there's just, I mean, that's a silly example, but so you have all of that legality as well. Now, if they're lucky enough to be in a career technical center, some of that has an umbrella. However, employers that do go out on the limb and hire a kid and do that can be fined because you know, what I'm trying to say, they're using equipment that they're really not supposed to be using. So it's this happy, it's convoluted, but
This is complex.
it's so complex.
This is really complex. I think that, I have a little bit of perspective here. I think that, it would be disappointing if we just focused on just one specific area with young people. The reason I say that is they have no idea what they really want, and to be able to have options, I think is important. But I'm also a believer in move the needle. So it starts with healthcare to help us figure this out. I could care less. We got to move the needle, and we have a role here, right? So, and to me, that's really important. At some point, when we get found our feet on solid ground and become the leader, the young people they need hope.
Right.
And that hope is created through, it being inspired with, and then being able to see options. So, it's like crawl, walk, run. If our crawl is that we're going to use this healthcare as an entryway platform to figure out how the hell do we become a leader here, then let's do that. But let's do something, right? And because we can't, sometimes it's so big, right? It seems insurmountable. I heard a fact, and everyone in this room may know this. You like the Columbus Promise doesn't cover all students in Columbus City schools, right? Like somewhere between 35 and 40% of the students that live in Columbus are in suburban schools, which they're not part of the Columbus Promise, right? So nothing against what the Columbus Promise does, right? So that's like, so to me, don't be afraid of doing something, but that's something that's providing, right? So let's lean in. And if there's a path of funding where we can figure out what's, let's make mistakes doing it so that we could then get to a place where we're like, okay, we bring a student in, here are your options. Here are the things, and maybe they explore. We're funding that, helping, we're the facilitator and connecting with the other organizations that have funding to do other things. But to me, it's like, this is an important area for us. Let's lean in. Let's not be afraid.
There's the manufacturing one. Tom's been doing this for 12 years. We've got programs. So there's manufacturing ones as well. I don't know what other ISPs are being spun off or created now, but we have some to try. And then I think we're the ones that we are committed to doing it. So to your point, we're doing something. And don't worry, we're gonna make mistakes. I'll report back.
I think you don't.
And I say this just, when I sit here, right, running a fairly major company, right, in a growing community. And how I started was the unions in New York and a vocational school decided on a pilot program where you work a week and go to school a week at an old boys public high school inside New York City. Okay, so that's how I'm here, right? Someone took a chance on a program that everyone probably thought was freaking crazy. So to me, that's why I'm saying we got to do something, right? And my statement is not to be boastful about me, right? It's about just trying to inspire us for leaning in, figuring out, and then we're smart people. We'll be nimble enough to make changes to improve what we're doing. But the foundation has to be leadership, as you were saying, and we might be a facilitator, but we should be the leader, and understanding that we need to have more than just one option, but one option might be our entry to figuring this out.
And I think in terms of the value it brings to both the school districts, the community, and the employer, this might be, because I think cross-pollinating some of those best practices and knowing that there's a model that is working somewhere, and for employers to be able to see that, if we can be the leader in that space, it will continue that employer leaning into us in all of the other spaces, I think, that sometimes you forget about. And if you can start that early, I think that's important.
Sounds like there's a lot of energy around this, but with the caveat though, that, right, like there's gonna be a learning curve that, this probably lives in the tactics, but like, maybe starting in one sector or, right, like trying some different things. But it does seem like there's good energy. Excuse me, allergies. good energy around
Welcome
this.
to Ohio.
Yeah.
Oh, I brought this with me from DC, right? Yeah, it's a swamp, you know. And the cherry blossoms are at their peak, so it's just like, just pollen everywhere. Anything else on this? I'm loving this conversation. It feels really exciting. I want to make sure we have like 9 minutes left. I want to make sure we talk about the order of the goals. So I get your views on that and we can all feel comfortable. Anything else on the youngins?
I have one more thing to say. Also, along these lines, we need to just make sure running a couple programs like this that we have supportive services in helping the kids, because they do not have those type of leaders or individuals at home. So they come into one type of program, but when they go home, they don't see what we're talking about. So we always have to be conscious of making sure that, you know, as we're dispelling what they see at home versus what we're trying to train them as it relates to a new career, that they have that support. And we have those partners as part of our teams or ones that work with us. That has to be taken in consideration, especially there's a difference between a kid coming from Columbus Public Schools versus Olentangy. So that has to always be in consideration.
Excellent.
Which I think leads. to
Thank you, Archie. I'm glad you jumped in.
Leads to a segmented approach to this too, because I think you've got to recognize that we're looking at the entire spectrum of kids, meaning all of them in the workforce. And there's a piece of this that needs, I think, how do we connect with the parents in all of this? So what's the research we need to do to dispel this, you know, that are out there, but everybody goes to college and all these things. What's today's future workforce look like? Talk a lot in the world of infant mortality, teaching grandparents not to put kids to sleep, you know, on their stomach anymore. Well, I think it's the same thing about how do we educate parents today and what the workforce of tomorrow looks like versus what they were trained coming out of school. So there's some, and then you got the economic spectrum of parents to deal with. So I think it's a complex issue, but I think it's something that needs to be, we've got to be real careful not to try to turn this into something very monolithic.
Well, so maybe we bring the book on Olentangy and Bridget to give everybody a look at it. Because what makes what they've done especially powerful and time intensive from an employer perspective is the expectation of many of us being part of that program. We had to educate the parents. We've had open sessions with the parents about jobs that didn't require degrees, and then maybe for a certificate you get through College Credit Plus versus an associate's versus a bachelor's, humble opinion. We have specific segments with just the students. I've been to a number of different high schools in the Olentangy district about just the students, about healthcare jobs in general. What could you do today? What did you do with College Credit Plus? What did you do if you spent 2 years? And then lastly, we're spending some time this summer with the Olentangy teachers coming on site. And I'm going to take the new tower and they're going to see all of these things. We've had them come out and do a surge tech day so they can see what a surge tech looked like. They got the whole outfit and spend time on the floors. And so what they've really done in that model, which could be copied, is incorporated the parents, the students, and the teachers, all getting a view from their own perspective. And what's really interesting is sometimes parents can come in after the events with the parents and the students, and they want to know for themselves what those jobs are and how they would get them too. So
I did hear that from other employers.
the
is
consistency
Getting
of
the
trying to
parents.
pull it all together
bringing
and
the
not just do students. Because then the student says, I don't want to go to college, I want to go do, and mom's like, oh, no, it's not happening. Right, and it's not unlike military recruiting in some aspects, right? You're trying to sell a different alternative approach or path. But they've done a heck of a nice job. I'm sure Christy and Chris would come talk about it and get everybody up to speed on what that looks like.
Yeah.
And then how do we sort of bolt on or work with them in Educational Service Center to do some of that work quickly?
Great idea.
A lot of potential there. So in looking at the goals, all 4 goals, and so we're making some tweaks, right? So in goal 2, we're going towards prosperity. And then in goal 4, we are going to be the leader and then have the backbone fit under strategies. But in looking at these 4 goals, what do y'all think about the order? Does this order imply priority? And if so, is that a bad thing? Is there another way to do it? And steering committee, I don't want to get too far into like, I'm not a graphic designer, I will say that. I don't want to get too far into that, but you know, we did talk about doing the what are currently goal 1, 2, and 3 as kind of like pillars, almost like graphic pillars. And having the goal 4 leader one, either along the bottom as a foundation or along the top as an umbrella. Would something like that feel more comfortable?
I love that other because it
Yeah.
implies it's all.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental one. If we don't accomplish 4, none of these others are possible.
Right. And so do you have strong feelings about having it as an umbrella or having it as a base?
I vote for base.
I like the base.
Base.
If I was nationwide, I wouldn't want it. Sorry, you got it.
So we're not incorporating the umbrella as part of the board's logo. Okay, cool.
This is just one more nerd thought, but I'm just wondering if these could just be phrased slightly more directive as opposed to, they feel a little passive. The right goals, but it's like, rather than that, it could be, we will, blah, blah, blah.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah.
So number 1 should
Excellent.
read, prepare more young people rather than are prepared.
Match.
Great, thank you. I was gonna,
That's good.
if we had time, I was gonna bring that up. It was, the lack of parallelism was also bothering me, so I'm glad that you've given me rein to to clean that up a little. So yeah, prepare more young people, match more job seekers, maybe enable more employers or something like that.
Well, 3 and 4 are more direct.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any- Yes. And on a resume, you run out of action verbs and then you're like, lead, spearhead, manage, yeah. Any other general thoughts? So do we call a formal vote or how do we do this? How do we get to approval? Because I guess it would be sort of provisional approval because I am gonna make changes.
Yeah, we're gonna make changes. We're gonna add the tactics, so we'll probably bring that to the next board meeting. So I don't know if to do a formal approval. Unless, if somebody's really against this, I guess now's your time to speak. But doesn't sound like, it sounds like everybody's supportive. So probably what we want to do then is just, first of all, I want to thank the steering committee because they put a lot of work into this. And that includes Chance and Scott here because they were the staff members along with me. And then I'm thanking in advance the rest of the staff because they're the ones who are going to make your vision real. So we're going to be putting a lot of hard work into that. And Kelly, this has been such a fantastic process for me, who geeks out over this stuff just like you. So I just really want to thank you for what you've done, so where you've led us so far. So.
It's been a pleasure and thank you to all of you for all the different ways that you've engaged. So steering committee members, people I interviewed, people who came to, board members who came to that sort of open house and who have been emailing with me and who sent me studies and surveys and all these great things. Thank you all for being so engaged. This is your plan. And it to me, it feels really exciting. Seems like there's a lot of excitement in the room and, also a little like trepidation, right? It's a lot of work. The staff's over there like,
And we're settled in on this being a 3-year plan.
Did you want to suggest something different?
I mean, not necessarily, but I mean, what I'm worried about is that, by the time we're done with this, we'll only have 2 years left in the camp. I mean, you know what I mean? It's going to be the end of 2023 by the time we're completely starting to incorporate this. And then 2 years.
Nope. You know what, Eric? My plan is we're incorporating this by July 1.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, that's a good question. I just think things have been changing here in
Yeah.
Central Ohio so fast.
So
And the strategic, this is 3 years. Everyone's starting to make adjustments to their corporate strategic plans.
And that's
just.
yeah.
Bye.